Imagine being a teenager, ripped from your home, and taken to a foreign land. Your world is turned upside down, and everything you've ever known is gone. This was the reality for a young man named Daniel. He was among the best and brightest of Judah, exiled to Babylon, a city of immense power and strange gods. But this wasn't the end of his story. It was just the beginning. In the glittering court of King Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel and his friends Hananiah and Azariah, later known as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were chosen for the king's service. They were to be trained in the language and literature of the Babylonians, eating the same rich food and wine from the king's table. But Daniel made a choice. He resolved not to defile himself with the royal food. He politely requested a simpler diet of vegetables and water. It was a huge risk. The chief official was afraid they'd look worse than the other young men, and he'd lose his head. But Daniel proposed a test. 10 days. Just 10 days. To see what would happen. After the test, Daniel and his friends looked healthier and better nourished than all the others. This small act of faithfulness was the first of many, and it set the stage for the incredible events that would follow. God blessed them with knowledge and understanding, and Daniel was given a special gift: the ability to interpret visions and dreams. One night, King Nebuchadnezzar had a terrifying dream that left him deeply troubled. He summoned all his magicians, enchanters, and astrologers, but there was a catch. He wouldn't tell them the dream. They had to tell him both the dream and its interpretation, an impossible task. The wise men of Babylon were stumped, and in his rage, the king ordered all of them to be executed, including Daniel and his friends. When Daniel heard the news, he didn't panic. He went to the king and calmly asked for a little more time. That night, he and his friends prayed, asking God for mercy and to reveal the mystery. And God answered. In a vision, the dream and its meaning were revealed to Daniel. He went back to the king and said, "No wise man, enchanter, or magician can explain this mystery, but there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets." He then described the king's dream: a colossal statue with a head of gold, a chest of silver, a belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, and feet of mixed iron and clay. A rock, cut out by no human hand, then smashed the statue to pieces and grew into a mountain that filled the whole earth. Daniel explained the interpretation. The statue represented a succession of earthly kingdoms, starting with Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, the head of gold. But each kingdom would be replaced by a lesser one, and ultimately, they would all be fragile and divided. The rock, however, represented God's own kingdom, an eternal kingdom that would never be destroyed. It would crush all the others and stand forever. Nebuchadnezzar was so astounded that he fell prostrate before Daniel, acknowledging the power of Daniel's God. He promoted Daniel to a high position, making him ruler over the entire province of Babylon. But Daniel's trials were far from over. Years later, under the same king, a new test arose. Nebuchadnezzar built a giant golden statue and commanded everyone to bow down and worship it whenever they heard the sound of music. Anyone who refused would be thrown into a blazing furnace. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, loyal to their God, refused to bow. The king was furious. He had them brought before him and gave them one last chance. Their response was legendary. "If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us. But even if he does not, we want you to know, Your Majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Enraged, the king ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual. The flames were so intense that they killed the soldiers who threw the 3 men in. But then, the king looked into the furnace and was astonished. He leaped to his feet and asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" They replied, "Certainly, Your Majesty." He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." He called them out, and they emerged without a single hair singed or the smell of fire on their clothes. Nebuchadnezzar praised the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who had sent an angel to rescue his faithful servants. Decades passed. Empires rose and fell, just as the dream had foretold. Babylon was conquered by the Medes and Persians. Daniel, now an old man, was still serving in the government. This time, under a new king, Daniel distinguished himself so much that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. This made the other administrators and officials incredibly jealous. They looked for grounds for charges against Daniel and his work, but they couldn't find any. He was trustworthy, and neither corrupt nor negligent. So, they hatched a wicked plan. They knew Daniel's only weakness was his unwavering devotion to his God. They tricked King Darius into signing an irrevocable decree. For the next 30 days, anyone who prayed to any god or human being other than the king would be thrown into the lion's den. When Daniel learned about the decree, what did he do? He went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. He didn't hide. He didn't compromise. His enemies saw him, and they rushed to the king. The king was devastated. Erelissadeh had been tricked and spent the rest of the day trying to find a way to save Daniel. But the law of the Medes and Persians could not be repealed. With a heavy heart, the king gave the order. Daniel was brought and thrown into the den of lions. The king said to him, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." A stone was placed over the mouth of the den, sealed with the king's own ring. The king spent a sleepless night, fasting and worrying. At the first light of dawn, he rushed to the lion's den and called out in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living, God has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions." And then a voice came from the den. It was, "Daniel, may the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." The king was overjoyed. He ordered that Daniel be lifted out of the den. Not a single scratch was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. The king then commanded that the men who had falsely accused Daniel be thrown into the lion's den, along with their families. Before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. The story of Daniel is more than just a series of dramatic events. It's a powerful testament to faith, integrity, and courage in the face of unimaginable pressure. From his youth to his old age, in the courts of multiple kings and empires, Daniel remained steadfast. Now, this sounds like a pretty sweet deal, right? A life of luxury. But there was a catch. This food was likely first offered to Babylonian idols, and it didn't align with the dietary laws Daniel had been taught to follow. For him, eating it wasn't just about food. It was a matter of spiritual integrity. It was the first test, the first subtle pressure to assimilate, to forget who he was and where he came from. So what did Daniel do? He didn't make a scene or start a protest. He respectfully requested a different meal. He proposed a test. For 10 days, let him and his friends eat only vegetables and drink only water, and then compared their health to the others. It was a bold move, but it was done with wisdom and tact. The result? At the end of the 10 days, Daniel and his friends looked healthier than everyone else. This small act of faithfulness, this quiet stand on a seemingly minor issue, set the stage for everything that was to come. It taught him that staying true to his principles didn't lead to ruin, but to favor and strength. It was the first building block of a life defined by unshakable integrity. Fast forward a few years, Daniel has risen through the ranks. He's now a respected advisor to the king, known for his wisdom and insight. But a new king, Darius, is on the throne, and with new power comes new politics. The other officials, consumed by jealousy of Daniel's position and his flawless record, hatch a plan to bring him down. They can't find any fault in his work. He's too diligent, too honest. So they decide to use his greatest strength against him. His faith. They trick King Darius into signing an unbreakable decree. For the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or man other than the king will be thrown into a den of lions. The trap was set. They knew Daniel's routine. 3 times a day, he would open his windows toward his homeland, Jerusalem, and pray. He had been doing it for years. Now, Daniel is faced with a terrifying choice. He could easily compromise. He could pray in secret, behind closed doors. He could skip his prayers for just 30 days. No one would have to know. It would be the sensible thing to do, right? The path of least resistance. But for Daniel, his relationship with his God was not something to be hidden or put on pause. It was the very source of his strength and identity. So what does he do? He goes home, opens his windows, just as he always had, gets down on his knees, and prays. He doesn't change a thing. He chooses faithfulness over fear. He chooses integrity over self-preservation. This wasn't a show of defiance for the sake of it. It was an act of profound loyalty. He knew the cost. He knew about the lions, but he also knew that compromising his core convictions was a fate worse than death. His stand wasn't loud or aggressive. It was a quiet, resolute continuation of who he had always been. The consequences were immediate. His enemies, who were watching, rushed to the king. King Darius was devastated. He had been manipulated, and now his most trusted advisor was condemned to a horrific death. But the law was the law. That night, Daniel was thrown into the lion's den. Can you imagine the terror, the darkness, the smell, the sound of powerful predators? Yet, the story tells us something miraculous happened. God sent an angel to shut the lions' mouths. Daniel spent the night completely unharmed. The next morning, a sleepless and distraught King Darius rushed to the den and called out, "Daniel, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you?" And from the pit came Daniel's voice, calm and clear. "My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions." Daniel's survival was a powerful testament, not just to him, but to the entire empire. The king issued a new decree, this time honoring Daniel's God. The very trap his enemies set for him became the platform for his greatest victory. His integrity didn't just save his life, it transformed the heart of a king and influenced a nation. So what can we learn from Daniel's incredible story? First, integrity is built in the small choices. Daniel's refusal to compromise on his diet as a teenager prepared him for the lion's den as an adult. Our character isn't forged in the big, dramatic moments, but in the daily, seemingly insignificant decisions where we choose right over easy. Second, true faith isn't about avoiding pressure. It's about how we respond to it. Daniel didn't pray for the problem to go away. He remained faithful right in the middle of it. He shows us that standing firm doesn't mean the lions won't be there. It means trusting that, even in the den, you are not alone. His peace came not from his circumstances, but from his connection to his source of strength. And finally, living with integrity has a ripple effect. Daniel's stand wasn't just about him. It impacted his friends, the officials, the king, and the entire empire. When we choose to live with courage and conviction, we give others permission to do the same. We become a source of light and inspiration in a world that often feels dark and compromising. Think about your own life. Where are you feeling pressured to bend? It might not be a king's decree or a den of lions. It might be pressure at work to cut corners, pressure from friends to do something that goes against your values, or even internal pressure to take the easy way out. Daniel's story challenges us to identify our non-negotiables, the core principles we will not compromise, no matter the cost. It reminds us to be consistent. Daniel's public faithfulness was simply an extension of his private discipline. He was the same person in the palace as he was in his prayer room, and it encourages us to be wise and respectful, just as Daniel was when he first proposed the diet test. Standing firm doesn't have to mean being abrasive or confrontational. Daniel's stand that defied an empire began with a simple choice to honor his God in a small way. That choice grew into a lifetime of integrity that could not be broken, even under the threat of death. His story echoes through the centuries, reminding us that one person, standing firm in their convictions, can indeed make a world of difference. It's a powerful call for us to live with that same courage, faith, and unshakable integrity in our own lives, every single day. Thanks so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more content that dives deep into timeless wisdom for modern life. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What's one area where you feel inspired to stand a little firmer? See you in the next video.